Well, hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. Today, I want to check in on the landscape of American politics, particularly the emerging Democratic field for the party that is shaping up and will, in 20 months go up against Donald Trump. So I want to today just basically freewheel it with my buddy and actually, in a way, the real host of this podcast, Corey deVos, who is the editor-in-chief of Integral Life. And we're on the Integral Life live feed right now. And hey, Corey, good to see you. Welcome.
Hey, dude. So awesome to be here with you.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to take an opportunity to invite anybody who is not already a member of Integral Life to consider it. It is the central portal for the integral movement on the planet. It's the home of Ken Wilber. And Corey, why don't you just take a minute and tell us a little bit about what's new or what's going on there?
Yeah, no, totally happy to. So let's see. I think one of the most exciting things that we're doing right now is the Ken Show, actually. So what we've done is we've given Ken Wilber his own monthly show. And he and I hop on together second Saturday of every month. And, I basically come to the show with a few questions prepared. And he just, it's sort of like I pull the string in the back of Ken's head and he just goes off for hours and hours. And it's awesome. I'm getting a lot of really, really wonderful feedback. A lot of people are writing in and saying, this is Ken at peak form. He's saying all sorts of, really new stuff. And it's been really precious, and it's been really really meaningful for me as well to be able to have this relationship with Ken, to be able to have this rapport with him, where I can hopefully get him to sort of go a few levels deeper in terms of how he responds to a lot of these issues,
and also the issues of the day.
Yeah,
not just all philosophy, but
that's right.
Relating to what's actually emerging.
Yeah, and we do both. Like, for example, last month we did a really cool 3.5-hour show talking about the stages of development, and we actually used film clips from like Mad Max and Casablanca and Jurassic Park, these really well-known films, in order to sort of illustrate the different styles, leadership styles, et cetera, associated with each of these stages, and that was a lot of fun. It was cool to watch Ken sort of geek out about some of these film scenes, because he loves film almost as much as he loves, philosophy.
Right.
So that was really cool. And then this past weekend, we did a follow-up to that where we talked about, I called it The Many Ways We Grow. I think the email is actually rolling out right now as we're having this conversation, where we talked about all the various lines of development, the intelligences, the talents, the capacities that actually evolve through these stages of development. And that was a really cool, another 3.5-hour talk. So we've got over 30 hours blocked so far. It's been awesome.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
All right. So we ready to talk about this crazy Democratic race here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting to see these people come in and to unwrap them, and to see them fresh and to hear what they really have to say and what they're bringing to the party. And all the more important, I think, actually, even as of today, where we got the full Mueller report, and it doesn't sound like there's any big smoking gun in there. And, it looks like the end of Trump is going to have to come through the ballot box, or, he's going to have to do two terms. So it's all the more important that the Democrats get their act together. And this is the process of that. There's 20 months of slugging it out. So what are the integral people interested in? What's lighting up the integral world space? And I know you're a lot more tuned into that than I am in terms of integral social media and that sort of thing. And I know I hear things about Pete and Andrew Yang and Marianne Williamson, and there's others. But what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, I think like every other online community, particularly ones that have a lot of, engaged in a lot of social media, the integral community is somewhat fragmented, and particularly around things like politics. So I'm seeing all sorts of things out there. I'm seeing I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm over, certain of these candidates, which we can certainly talk about as we go. I'm also seeing this, which I guess I'll characterize it as a hopefully healthy sort of immune system response coming from Integral Land around sort of the worst excesses of leftism, particularly around woke culture, critical theory, what's been going on college campuses, and sort of the erosion of First Amendment rights and all that. So there's a lot of integralists who have a lot of concern about what's happening on the left, which I'll note is, they're having these concerns at a time when the left doesn't, just to be truthful, at least until recently, haven't had a whole lot of political power since 2016. Now, I think a lot of these criticisms are fair. I also think that sometimes it can sort of, it can turn into this, there's this sort of anti-SJW, anti-social justice warrior, kind of sentiment that's pretty strong in some sub-communities within the integral space. And whereas I think, as I said, I think a lot of that can be healthy. A lot of the times, however, I see that as sort of reactionaries reacting to reactionaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the SJWs are already a very reactionary kind of group themselves. And I think that what they're reacting to is definitely worthy of, deeper consideration, and certainly a more integral consideration. And yet the way they go about it, I sort of agree with a lot of the criticisms. It's oftentimes just as closed-minded, narrow-minded, just as the conservatives who they're criticizing. And I think there's a lot of valid criticisms to be had there.
I do too. I think just in terms of basic integral practice, we want to see the piece of the truth of all sides of this thing.
Yeah.
And, the woke culture, actually, they're waking to something. There's a whole karmic stream that they're in touch with. And I want to be, I want to see that. Because I'm learning a lot from that, actually. And yet, you can only go so far so fast. And we have gone at warp speed in terms of Me Too and race and so forth. And we want to, be smart politically.
Right.
And a lot of people are turned off by political correctness, including, apparently, according to the Atlantic survey, 75 to 80% of blacks.
Yeah,
right. So it's something to keep in mind. And what will win Trump another term quicker than anything is just a Democratic candidate that the majority of people can't get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Particularly if all of our candidates, I just use the word "our" as if I'm sort of a staunch leftist, which I'm very much not. But I am aligned with most of these Democrats in terms of where the political pendulum is today. And today it's completely stacked against what I consider some of the worst elements of the conservative party. And so I am definitely going to be making a big push for the left with this upcoming election. However, I've got lots of caveats around that. I'm not a leftist. I just want, like you do, I just want sort of this malignant element of Trumpism to be, taken out of the system, taken out of our, the political waters.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm going to be making, my push towards the left. But I want to see that push be as healthy as possible. And if woke culture itself is forcing, pretty much every one of these candidates to apologize for some, problematic behavior or some element of their identity, or, a lot of people in the woke culture asking questions like, are we ready for a white man to run for president? It's like, y'all got to get off of this bullshit. This is, if you're making your candidates have to apologize right out of the gate before they're even allowed to say anything, all you're doing is weakening the chances of any of these guys to take on a strong man like Trump.
Yep. So who are people for? What are you seeing out there in Integral Land?
Yeah, totally. So I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm among these various factions around a few different people. I'm seeing a lot around Pete Buttigieg. And I am also sort of all aboard, the Buttigieg train. There seems to be two popular ways of pronouncing his name, either Boot Edge Edge. I prefer the second one, which is Buddha Judge, because I think that wisdom and discernment are the two qualities that are most lacking in the executive branch today. Yeah. And they're the two that I want Mayor Pete to sort of bring back for us. So I'm as of today pretty enamored with Buttigieg. I also see a lot of enthusiasm around what we might call some of the more fringy candidates. I don't mean fringe necessarily that they hold views that are completely in left field, but they're people who are, I think, struggling to get more visibility in the media and just sort of in the Democratic gestalt in general. And that's people like Andrew Yang. I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm around him.
Yeah, I have a lot of people write me about Andrew Yang and encourage me to check him out. And I just checked him out a bit. And I got to say, I had an immediate like for him. He has a great way about him. And I guess his thing is more techie and the universal basic income. And that's sort of the horse he's riding. And I'll be interested to see how to check him out.
Yeah, no, I agree. He is sort of approaching this like a technocrat. And, I think that, what I appreciate about what's happening on the left with all of these candidates, 20-something candidates, is that all of them are expanding and informing the platform in various ways. Yeah. What I see someone like Yang doing is, Yang is kind of coming in with this energy that I characterize as like, he's basically saying to us, guys, so many of these debates, all you're really doing is rearranging furniture on the deck of the Titanic, right? And if we don't get in front of these like really major trends that are coming down the line and are right around the corner.
Automation, artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Huge numbers of people that aren't employed.
That's right. That's right. So he is calling for these major structural lower right quadrant changes that can sort of get a more proactive grip on these trends that are coming down rather than, reacting after the case when we're sort of already screwed. Right. So I appreciate what he's doing there. Just like, I appreciate Marianne Williamson. I don't think Marianne Williamson has a shot at all, but I appreciate what she's bringing into the discourse. I appreciate the heart and the spirit. And, and honestly, she's a really fantastic communicator.
Yeah, let me just play a piece from her town hall on CNN. And let me also just salute CNN for doing town halls for these so-called fringe candidates. And it's good to see these people. And she did a great job. And here's just a piece. This is the flavor of Marianne Williamson. And I know a lot of people in the integral world have known her as a teacher. She definitely has an integral sensibility. She doesn't talk a lot about evolution or the aqua model or anything like that. But she's been very powerful over the years, and I've always appreciated her. And for her to come in with this message on love is pretty remarkable. So here she is.
Do you think love can win the White House?
Well, first of all, I think it's the only thing that can win the White House. I think far more people in this country love than hate. Far more. And that's true in this world. The problem we have today is that those who hate with conviction. And conviction is a force multiplier. Those who hate today, those who fear, they are effective, they are organized, and they are convicted. Those of us who love now need to become convicted and organized and strategized. We need to do more than small random acts of kindness. We need huge strategized acts of doing the right thing. We need to rescue these children. We need to pay reparations. We need to wage peace. We need to purify the heart of a nation, just like we need to purify our own hearts. And then when we do that, when we're honest about the darkness we need to deal with, we will get to such incredible light, and we will have a new birth of freedom.
So what do you think of that for presidential politics?
I think all of that was beautifully said and is exactly the reason why she's unelectable.
Right. Exactly. But she knows, I think, in her heart of hearts, it's not a pretty long shot. But to be bringing that into the field is remarkable. And it's like you said, if all of these candidates are coming from what, we used to see as fringe. I mean, we used to think Bernie was fringe. it just opens the space to include more stuff. And a bigger space is, we have more to work with in there.
And then we got Bernie.
Yeah, it's he's right up there in terms of fundraising. I mean, he's way ahead in terms of fundraising. And I have been kind of allergic to Bernie over the years. He seemed cranky and old. He's 77 years old right now, 77. And by the time he would take office, he would be 79. And that strikes me as almost disqualifying. And I I'm being ageist to say that.
I don't think you are.
Well, I'll tell you what, Corey. Let me play a couple things. What I got was I watched Bernie on the Fox News town hall, which has gotten a lot of attention here in the last week.
It's sort of a sea change.
Yeah, and it was for me.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, I see no diminishment of any kind, aside from he's a little bit stooped. It made me rethink Bernie, and it made me get excited about Bernie. I don't know if I'm for Bernie, but I'm for Bernie being there, man. I'm for Bernie carrying his torch. Yep. And it feels a little to me like Bernie is in the same position that Reagan was in at the late 70s, where, Reagan had been a crackpot in the 60s. And the world turned and, he didn't change, but the world came to him. Right. That's what's happening with Bernie. So anyway, here's a piece from that town hall meeting where he is being interviewed by Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum, who are two of the stars of Fox News. And they're, trying to pin him down a little bit on, why do you demonize billionaires and millionaires? Where we'll start is this question that Bret Baier asks him about, look at all the money you made on your book. And Bernie became a millionaire because of the book he wrote for his last campaign. Aren't you a hypocrite? Isn't making money like this, isn't this the American dream? And it's very interesting to hear his answer.
When you wrote the book and you made the money,
yeah,
isn't that the definition of capitalism, the American dream?
No. What we want is a country where everybody has opportunity. I have a college degree. Like, I'm a United States Senator. But a lot of people don't have a college degree. A lot of people are not United States Senators. I want everybody in this country to be able to have health care, to have education, to when they turn on the water, have drinkable water, not toxic water. So what we are fighting for, Brett, is a society not where just a few people can make a whole lot of money, but a society where everybody in this country has the opportunity to live in security and dignity.
All right. So this weekend.
Well said, Bernie.
Yeah, I love that because, I was kind of with Bret Baier. Isn't that the definition of the American dream? And I'm like, yeah, Bernie, isn't it? And he says, long pause. No, actually. I felt myself shift there. And I love that. Anytime I can feel myself really look at a new perspective. And he just says, no, wait. The American dream is or should be about everybody at least having a baseline of decency in terms of health, education, and welfare,
One of the things I think Bernie is skilled at is being able to point to these sort of fallacies. In this case, there's this false equivalence, right? That if you are railing against, massive wealth inequality, then you must therefore be anti-capitalism or anti-wealth, period. And, I really don't think that's Bernie's stance, but that's how he's often sort of caricatured.
Right. No, it's true. In fact, I'll play another piece here. Hang on. Where he gets into that specifically.
You do spend a lot of time vilifying millionaires.
No, I don't vilify. The fact that I think people who are doing phenomenally well right now, as you know, for 40 years, we have seen a shrinking middle class. You got 40 million people living in poverty. And today, just so happens that the very wealthy are doing incredibly wealthy. It's not vilifying to say that people have a whole lot of money, in some cases, billions of dollars of wealth. They should pay their fair share of taxes.
Right. Well,
that's not vilifying.
Last question on this.
Oh, and actually, I'll play this piece too. This is the famous piece that came out of the Fox News town hall where Bret Baier did the thing that a lawyer should never do.
Yeah.
And that is ask a question that you don't know the answer to. And so he asked people, would you like to have government-run health care?
Audience, a question. If you could raise your hand here, a show of hands of how many people get their insurance from work, private insurance right now. How many get it from private insurance? Okay. Now, of those, how many are willing to transition to what the senator says, a government-run system?
So that'll learn them. Now, to be fair, there were Democrats in there too, and it wasn't all just Fox News viewers. But there's a new power to this that didn't exist even in the last cycle.
Yeah, I think there's a number of really important lessons come out of that. A, that Fox might not know its own audience as much as it thinks it does. B, Democrats really, really need to start showing up on these conservative platforms because that is their only opportunity to speak directly to these people rather than having their words mediated for them. I think that we've had this sort of idea, Jeff, for a while now that you can't give a platform to what liberals would consider bad ideas, right? And I think that is proving itself to be an old media sort of idea that is starting to work against us now. And so I think that we're approaching this sort of new way of thinking about these platforms that actually says, no, we actually need to invite the controversy, even if it seems kind of silly. We still need to have the conversation.
Well, and I'll give an example of how that has worked for me. I was a free trader back in the Reagan era. I thought free trade was self-evidently good. And in many ways it is and has been, particularly if you look globally, if you have a world-centric perspective. The rise of people out of poverty in China and India and a lot of the so-called third world has been an enormous move forward for humanity that is the result of globalization. But from a nationalist perspective, and we need that perspective as well, it has not been so good. And so Bernie's turned me around on that. And here's a piece where he talks about it, and this is where he has that kind of credibility and authenticity that I think is really important at this point. I mean, he was a democratic socialist before democratic socialism was cool.
Yeah.
And he talks about that here. So here's this piece.
And why did I oppose all of these disastrous trade agreements? It was very clear to me that these agreements on the Democratic and Republican leadership was written by multinational corporations to make these corporations even wealthier at the expense of the American worker. So let me suggest what is not a radical idea. American workers should not have to compete against desperate people around the world who are making $1 or $2 an hour. I understand that we're taking on corporate America, we're taking on the Republicans, we're taking on the Democratic establishment, taking on the drug companies, taking on the insurance companies, taking on the military-industrial complex. You know what? Okay. It ain't easy. I know that.
He's a fighter, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, and a couple things. First off, the healthcare question, when the audience started applauding for Medicare for all, that is the stuff that Overton windows are made of.
Remind me what an Overton window is.
An Overton window is basically this lower left agreement, this ongoing agreement about what's allowed to be talked about and what's not. So that window changes, and really, really skilled politicians are masters at swinging that Overton window of allowing people to talk about things that were, maybe even just a year ago were taboo. Bernie is one of those people where we can actually talk about socialism now, where, that was a third rail, not too long ago. Trump is also one of those masters.
Yes.
He's able to swing that Overton window pretty much wherever he wants. And you can see that around terms like nationalism.
Yep.
So it's,
which that's the upside of Trump to me.
Yeah.
Is that he talk about increasing the space of what it's okay to talk about.
Everything's fair game now. And that's good.
And that's all right.
Yeah, it's peeled this scab of political correctness away, which allows us to have more honest, if not more painful, conversations. But conversations that have been overdue and just, again, festering because we had these sort of rules that, well, we're not allowed to talk about that.
Yep.
That doesn't exactly make the problems go away.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of the audience applauding that point, one of the recent things that came up was there was a conservative, a GOPer, who invited Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to talk to coal miners in like North Carolina or something like that. And she said, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll show up. I'll be happy to talk to them." After that town hall, they rescinded the invitation. They're like, "Oh, we can't let that happen again, right? We need to, make sure we can control the message here."
Yeah. So let me play one other clip here. And this is to buttress my case that Bernie's a lot more with it than I thought. And this is an argument. This is simply stylistic, what I'm going to play. It's a sort of a tete-a-tete that he had with Martha McCallum. She was talking about it's going to raise taxes for everybody to have this Medicare for all. And he said, but you have to also factor in that people aren't going to have healthcare premiums anymore. And she said, but you're going to have to pay one way or the other and so forth. So this is what is they're talking about. So that sets this up.
You're going to pay one way or the other.
But look,
Martha, pay one way or the other.
Martha.
Whether it's in your income tax or your payroll tax, you're going to pay.
Look, healthcare is not free. You never heard me suggest that we're going to magically...
You just said it was going to be free for everyone.
It's going to be free at the point of when you use it, okay? And you go to... Why are you so shocked by this?
Because someone's going to pay.
Somebody is going to pay.
Who are they? Who pays?
Okay. One second.
Okay,
Relax.
I'm just asking.
We'll be talking.
Please.
We'll get through this together.
It's a common question.
Okay.
We had so many email questions.
Okay.
Ask Senator Sanders how he is
Fair
going
enough.
to pay.
I got it.
I love that.
It was such a disingenuous question.
How so, do you think?
Well, it was a willful misunderstanding of what Bernie means by quote unquote free.
Yeah, but it also teed him up to explain that.
That's right.
And that's, I think, really important because I hate to say this, I hadn't really made that connection. Yes, people's taxes will go up, but their premiums will go down. I mean, Medicare is any example, you're down to 1/10 of what you had to pay before.
Yeah, which is a big deal for families that are paying $450 for 2 weeks worth of insulin, whereas in Spain they pay $6 a month. Or there's any number of these stories comparing these respective systems. And Jeff, I agree with you that Bernie is bright. He's on fire. He's sharp. He's focused. He certainly does not carry himself like you would expect a 78-year-old man to carry himself. However, I think that having concerns around his age, that to me is not ageism. That's just having like a reasonable sense of like
reading the actuarial tables.
Yeah, it's actuarial statistics. Like he's more likely to have severe health complications in the next 4 years than someone who was even 8 years his junior. So I also think that there is I think there's a certain plurality of the left and the right, honestly, who are just kind of over this whole boomer thing, right? And who just really want to see a new generation who has a radically different experience than the boomers did in order to start making decisions around economics and foreign policy and so forth.
Well, that's the excitement of Mayor Pete.
Yeah, that's right.
The first millennial candidate who looks like he has a shot.
So can I just say, what the hell, guys? What about Gen X? Why does Gen X always get skipped? We're always in the shadow.
Yeah.
Well, everyone talks about boomers. Everyone talks about millennials. No one gives a shit about Gen X.
Well, you mentioned Pete earlier, and I did a episode at him.
Great episode.
Oh, thank you. A couple of weeks ago, called Mayor Pete's X Factor. Could it be integral consciousness? And I think he does have an integral sensibility just in terms of flex flow mind, just the basic definition of being able to take multiple perspectives, of not demonizing and vilifying. And I find that very attractive. What do you see from Mayor Pete?
Oh, I see. So, I mean, first off, sort of across the board, and I think you mentioned this in your episode, across the board, quality for quality, he's like the anti-Trump, right? He's got composure where Trump is just this fucking chaotic attractor. He's got, I think sort of a goodness to him, a trustworthiness. He's got integrity. He's very well spoken. He's got a sensitivity that is sort of couched in strength. He's got experience in a number of sectors that would directly inform his role as commander-in-chief. I just think he's got a lot going for him. And I see what you see, Jeff. For example, I was really impressed with, the ideas he has around the Supreme Court, for example, whereas a lot of liberals, rightfully so, are sort of out for blood. They're out for vengeance. They're saying, Mitch McConnell withheld a Supreme Court nomination from Obama, which has permanently skewed the courts for a generation, if not more. And, we need to find some sort of leverage here so that we can, restore balance. Now, of course, restore balance means so that we can get back at them and stack the courts with our own judges.
With our side.
Which just is an escalation, right? And it keeps on escalating. What I love about Pete's idea, it was that he said, okay, well, let's deal with the problem on the ground that we have, which there is this, the courts have been, partisanized, polarized, and we need to remove this partisanship from the courts, because this is exactly where it doesn't belong. So one way to do that, which will both get us out of the problem that we have today, which is that we have a skewed Supreme Court because of political and parliamentary maneuvering and sabotage and all that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say Democrats can nominate so many, conservatives can nominate so many, but then those judges who are nominated make their own nominations, and this gets us out of the whole partisanship problem to begin with. So I was fascinated by that logic.
Something new. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
We'd have the court as is. So that doesn't change. So nobody has to get too worked up. But then those 9 justices appoint 5 justices who are cycling in and out.
Yeah.
I mean, he said this is one idea. There's others. But it makes a certain sense.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's new. And this is another thing that I think that I've learned, and it's funny that I should have to learn this because I'm an evolutionary, but things change rapidly sometimes when they change. And we've seen that with Trump. In a sense, you could say we saw it with Obama. This idea that somebody can't come out of left field and become president has been blown away from the last 2 presidents. So things can move very quickly. And, Mayor Pete may be, in terms of actually moving the culture forward, Mayor Pete may be, what we're looking for. He's pretty young, talk about ageism, but he's pretty young at 37. But maybe he's the VP, maybe who knows how it all shakes down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with your assessment. And, the interesting thing to me, Jeff, is that each of these sort of front runners that the Democrats have right now, every one of them has a quality or a set of qualities that is a big turn on for other liberals and other progressives and a massive turn off for conservatives.
Yeah.
Every one of them down the line. So Buttigieg, he's gay. And whether we like it or not, I'm encouraged by the fact that polling seems to indicate that at this point, nobody gives a shit, which is pretty amazing for how much progress we've made in the last 15 years. That said, I'm not so naive as to think, as to pretend like there's not a lot of things being said behind closed doors. Yeah. That particularly, we have this legacy of gays somehow meaning emasculation And I think that when you're going up against a strong man like Trump in a conservative's mind, you got to play to strengths.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be an issue. Now liberals love it because they get another sort of token.
Yeah, I'm not sure it doesn't balance itself out in terms of people who are actually attracted by the fact that he's gay.
Yeah, that's always
the people who are turned off, and they're probably the hardcore left and the hardcore right that they're immovable anyway.
Right. That's right. Yep.
But the reasonable middle at this point, I think, is like, it's cool.
I think so too. We saw that with Jared Polis, right? First gay governor. Nobody knew that he was gay until he won.
Yeah.
Which tells me, guys, stay away from the damn identity politics.
Yeah.
This is where you're getting all your bad press. This is where you are pushing people into Trumpism because of this preoccupation with identity politics and intersectionalism and all this crap, which, by the way, guys, is not the Democrats. The Democrats are supposed to be right-hand quadrant sort of absolutists. They're supposed to reduce everything to the right-hand quadrants. Get the hell out of the lower left quadrant. You're not making any difference whatsoever, right? You can't police people's thoughts. You just can't. I know you're going to try, but you can't. But get back over to these lower right quadrant solutions, these policy solutions that actually have where there's a there, where there's actually a way to create leverage and reduce suffering in real time for people. That's Bernie's strength. Bernie's a lower right quadrant. He reduces everything to the lower right quadrant, which I think we can criticize him for. But at least he's bringing in these big policy recommendations, which I think is critical. And that's what Elizabeth Warren is doing too. She is coming up with, some fairly remarkable policy suggestions. Just nobody's really paying attention right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I just started her book. So, they all have a campaign book.
Oh, of course.
And it's kind of cool to read them. They're generally not too long and too complicated. But it's good to just hear them in their own words, where they have your full attention. They're not being mediated by the media. This is their message, and to compare one to the other. Yeah. And that's where I really fell for Pete, is that his biography is, really at a very high level. It's beautifully written.
Yeah. Did you see the Onion article that came out? It was something like, Pete Buttigieg astonishes audience by talking to manufacturing robots in binary.
Well, that would be his 8th language.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was like, well, someone's got to negotiate with our future artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Overlords. All right. So we're winding down here. I wanted to end with one last thing, and that is, how do you think the Democrats ought to deal with Trump?
Yeah, what a tricky question, right? On the one hand, I think it makes sense to create a clear contrast with Trump. However, it can't hinge on I'm not Trump. That can't be the essence of your campaign, because you're not going to convince anyone, right? No one is going to change their mind about how they feel about Donald Trump at this point in the game. So you're not going to convert people over. You're not going to bring people into the left. There's this kind of idea, if I can just prove to people using logic and facts how corrupt this guy is, guess what? They like him because he's made out of Teflon and he blows through all of that. And you're not going to get it. What you need to do is you need to embody the values that you criticize Trump for lacking. And you need to create a very, very clear contrast with those values, not with Trump as a character. I also think, Jeff, I keep bringing it up, but I think that these guys need to figure out how to appeal to younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, while also finding more sophisticated ways to push back against woke culture and all of its core pathologies. I think we're starting to see some of that. I think largely how, the debacle around Joe Biden, basically, he's a close talker and we're also offended because he's creepy, because he's it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that we're starting to see some pushback because of things like that.
And I don't think it really involves as many actual people and voters as it does social media oxygen.
I've made that argument too, and I've had a lot of people argue against me that actually it is a bit more insidious than maybe we give it credit for. Okay. For example, on college campuses where these values really are being encoded into sort of, campus rules and standards and practices and all that. And I think there's a valid concern there, but I agree with you that I have to remind myself that internet culture is not real culture. You know what I mean? It's this distorted circus mirror reflection of real culture, and the things that are happening on the internet and the conversations that are taking place aren't necessarily the same conversations that are taking place elsewhere. That said, a few weeks ago, there was that thing where, again, these woke activists were harassing Chelsea Clinton and blaming her for some terrorist attack. I mean, it's gotten really, really ridiculous. And we've gotten to the point where, okay, we already know that all conservatives hate liberals. The problem is all liberals also hate liberals. And if nobody likes liberals, how the hell are we going to get them elected?
Yeah.
So that's, my biggest concern, Jeff, is I see right now a GOP that is completely beholden to the red meat Trump base. They're stuck between a rock and Trump's base. I have a concern that the same thing could happen with Democrats as they become increasingly beholden to the most vocal elements of woke culture. Yes. And then you can't navigate once you're there,
Yeah. Well, welcome to politics, man.
Yeah.
It's, walking these lines and getting the coalitions together and, attracting and offending and the landscape's different. And we have this, the left and right extremes are different, but politicians always, this is what they do. This is their job. So we'll see how they do it. I wanted to actually play Marianne Williamson's response to how you deal with Trump.
Oh,
and then I wanted to play Bernie's, because I think they're both right. So anyway, let me just play this one from Marianne Williamson. And this is her CNN town hall with Dana Bash. Just to set up the question, Dana Bash asks her, so your theme is love. How are you going to deal with Donald Trump? And how are you going to deal with Donald Trump on a stage in a debate? And here's Marianne Williamson's answer.
Let's not pretend that he would debate me, Dana. He would insult me. He would bait me, but he would not debate me.
So on the stage with Donald Trump.
What do you do with a child? How do you treat a psychopath? I would not go in expecting a reasonable conversation. I would be open to a reasonable conversation. I would not go in expecting one. My conversation is with the American people.
And then on she goes. So I like that. How do you deal with a child?
Make him sit in the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a dad. How do Trump is sort of like a, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, something like that?
Yeah, maybe. I think my 6-year-old has more maturity.
Well, here's Bernie, and I like this too. So, and here he's obviously being asked about Trump.
Whether you're conservative or moderate or progressive, I don't think the American people are proud that we have a president who is a pathological liar. And I say that, it does not give me pleasure to say that. All right. I disagreed with George W. Bush on almost everything. Bush was not a pathological liar. I think Trump is a dangerous president, but if all we do is focus on him, we lose. Our job is to develop an agenda that speaks to the needs of workers. When we do that, we're going to win and win big.
Yep. I'm in big agreement that Democrats need to turn their attention away from the donor class and towards labor. They need some more of this, FDR sort of energy. I think they need to find a message, hone in on a message that communicates both common sense and the common good. And I think if they can dial that in and find a way to communicate that to working class people who are struggling, in this sort of neoliberal post-NAFTA world that we live in, I think that we will see another sea change for the blue team. By speaking to people and their concerns and meeting people where they're at and not being so high-minded and so oversensitive and so outraged.
Well, that's the common sense part.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that as a slogan, Corey. I think common sense and common good. That's pretty good.
Common sense for the common good. Let's
common sense for the common good. And both of those, I mean, it's like you're saying, common sense, let's not overdo any of this. Let's just find things that work. And I love that about Integral. It sort of gets post-ideological in the sense that I don't even want to be a part of one of these teams anymore. I want just what works.
That's right.
And then for the common good and just this new attitude, and we're seeing it from all kinds of people, that the collective needs some attention.
Yeah.
And the culture and the communitarian aspects of the culture need some attention.
Right. Well, that's I think a really important point, Jeff, particularly about how integrals tend to orient to this type of stuff, because I do think that we have a resistance to labeling ourselves or committing ourselves, limiting ourselves to only one or two or three different labels. I think that for both of us, Integral allows us to sort of redefine some of these ideas for ourselves. Like, I consider myself a progressive, but among integral lines, which means I'm a progressive insofar as I want to see systems emerge and, get created that do not currently exist. And I want those systems to be more reflective of an integral consciousness. But I also have a concern, no one has made me more come into more alignment with my conservative views than Donald Trump. There are certain institutions and practices and elements of decorum, et cetera, that are under threat right now and that I want conserved. I want to protect these things. I want to wrap my arms around them. And, and this is everything from the Justice Department to the FBI to these things that liberals for decades have had a lot of justified criticism and skepticism around. All of a sudden, liberals love the CIA. What the hell happened in the last 20 years? Right? But I think it comes down to this, like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I was talking to Mark Fischler a couple of weeks ago, and, I commented, I was like, in my 20s, I would have been more into this, like, anarchist, like, let's just, like, burn the whole thing and see what emerges afterwards. But now I've got a kid and a mortgage, and I don't have the time or the energy or the willingness to sort of light the powder keg and see what happens. Well,
welcome to, emergence and evolution in your own life.
Yeah, and middle age. God damn it.
Yeah, welcome to middle age and parenthood. and no, at some point you realize, and we do as a culture, that irreverence is overrated. I mean, we have a new respect now for dignity and decorum and decency. And, these are traditional values that need to be brought into a new integral integration. So, thank you, President Trump.
Seriously, and thank you for so many things. Thank you for getting us all so passionate. Thank you for making sure that everyone in this country know who these people's names are. I mean, during previous administration, people didn't have the names of every cabinet position memorized the way we do today. Yeah. I didn't know who the Secretary of Education was 8 years ago, but I sure as hell know who it is today. And my hope is that this continues, that no matter who we elect in 2020, that the same level of engagement, the same level of passion, the same level of just civic responsibility continues to emerge, cycle after cycle after cycle. I think the biggest lesson that we've learned is we can't take our hands off the wheel again.
Yeah. All right, Corey. Well, thank you so much.
This has been so much fun, dude.
All right, man. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned to the Daily Evolver, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, man. Bye.